Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor of Ultiworld, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Ultiworld senior editor Keith Raynor. It is Thanksgiving week. Happy Thanksgiving in advance to everyone. Hope you have a lovely holiday weekend. This feels like a nice time, more so than usual, to take a couple days off work, have a long extended weekend, and I hope for many people able to spend time with family and friends in a way that has been difficult over the last couple of years because of COVID, of course.
It's because you're so close to the end of the year, you start to get into, I think, just the end of year celebration and Thanksgiving are kind of like just intrinsically related. Like everybody thinks of them, we're coming towards the end of the year. So you get into kind of these reflective moments, and that's usually what we're doing at this time of year. The competitive season is over, so it's a little weird that instead of looking backward like we might usually be doing at this time, we're actually going to be looking forward to the college championships.
Yeah, it's definitely a little weird. It's going to be like take the break for Thanksgiving and then come back and work extremely hard for a month at a time of year that's normally like thinking about the following season and the following year. But, it's going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be a wild experience. And I mean, let's just get started with something right away that Keith, I follow stuff pretty close.
You do.
I keep tabs on what's going on in the sport. I do a lot of, reporting on things. I'm talking to folks. I read through all of the press releases and everything coming out from USA Ultimate, and I literally learned something today that I just simply had not seen. And this is a reminder to me to always go through and read the entire guidelines. It's like reading the rules. Everyone says they do it, but they don't. Everybody probably thinks that they read the guidelines, but they don't, because I've literally seen nobody mention this. USA Ultimate seeding rules, Keith. We were getting all ready. We're going to talk about the seeding. How are they going to do the seeding? It's going to be so hard this year. There's no results. How do you just use 2019, 2020? Do you just kind of like do it by feel and then see what the teams think? Well, Keith, quote from the guidelines, the D1 and D3 college championships will be seeded based on a geographically constrained random draw. That's it.
Wow.
That's the seeding.
Wow.
It's going to be random. I have asked USA Ultimate what geographically constrained means. As of this moment, I literally might hear back during the show. As of this moment, I don't know what that means. I assume it means no teams from the same region will be allowed to be in the same pool. That would be my guess.
I imagine that'll be the goal, is to keep people from playing against the same teams again.
But Keith, I mean, people have asked about sort of more randomized style of pool selection. We're getting it.
Oh, we're getting the whole pack. One of the editors the other day made a reference to smoking the whole pack. The old punishment parents supposedly would give kids caught smoking cigarettes and make them smoke the whole pack. And that's the community right now. We wanted all of us who were like, we want some randomness can we do something more interesting? And USA Ultimate's like, you want random? You're getting the whole thing. It's all random, baby.
This is going to be wild. I mean, just based on the fact that it's going to be a random draw, right? We're going to have, I feel like we're statistically likely to have a really insane pool and a really soft pool that's not nearly as tough as the others. And especially this year, because there's a kind of a large number of teams that maybe wouldn't make nationals in a normal year for a variety of reasons. Either their region got too many bids relative to its current strength, or teams in play in the series, so they got in. And so you have like a kind of a larger, lower group of teams, which means that, 3 of those teams are probably going to end up in the same pool.
But you know what, Charlie? That happens anyway.
That's true.
The real question is, how different are those likelihoods from how likely they are in the current system? We currently get pools that are imbalanced. almost every time. I mean, when's the last tournament we saw where every pool felt roughly equal strength? It's just not very common, especially at the championships. And we've kind of, taken it as part of how it works, which is fine.
Normally you earn a 1 seed. You earn a 1 seed during the season, and that means you get to play the 8 and then the 12, 13, and 17. And yeah, the 1 seed should be way better than the other teams in their pool, but that's something that you earn by your performance during the season. It makes a lot of sense not to just give a team a free 1 seed, basically. And we probably will end up likely with more balanced pools as opposed to a generally, single really strong team in Pool A and then a really tough Pool D with the 4, the 5, the 9. And then, the bottom of that pool is usually pretty weak because they get the 20. But this is going to be a lot of fun. There's so many ways to make it exciting to do this random draw. I hope they don't just announce it straight out. Like,
that's 100% what they're going to do.
you could stream it. You could go on Instagram Live. You could do the whole draw, balls. and then instead of just announcing it in an article, like have a reveal show, Selection Sunday type deal, where you come on and you list the pool 1 seeds and you do the whole thing.
A giant wheel. Like the Wheel of Fortune wheel, just like roll the wheel, and if it comes onto a regionally locked team, then you knock it a nudge over.
Spin it again.
Spin it again. Like, I think that would be very entertaining. And you know what, Charlie? Discovering this means we literally can't do seeding predictions because there won't be seeds. Like, it doesn't matter if you're the 1 seed.
There's nothing to predict.
There's no seeding at all. Like, it doesn't. You're just in pools. You're just in groups. So I want to get excited for the possibility of a Metro East team being the number 1 seed in nationals, but there isn't really going to be seeds for me to count on that happening. So
that's right. I mean, seeding is basically a meaningless thing. There's just pools.
Yeah, it might have been interesting. What do you think it would have been entertaining to do the seeding beforehand? So, just number 1 team in the Southeast will be in this pool.
No, you can't do that because people would use that information and like intentionally lose games.
But that might be for spicy regionals. And then only the Southeast is the situation with all the information. Imagine 2 teams playing the final and they're trying to lose.
They're both trying to lose. Just like back-to-back turfs,
Just trying to but they can't over lose because then they lose too much and they get sanctioned and they don't get to go to nationals. So it would have been the game within the game.
Only rookies playing the entire game.
only offhand, it would have been wild.
It's like the Southeast 2 seed gets, Metro East, Great Lakes 2, Oh my gosh. Well, I don't know when we're going to find out. I mean, it's literally, you could just do it any time, right? They could do the seeding, the group selections with a random number generator on the internet. Like today, right now.
It could be lurking around any corner.
We could do predictions, Keith, by just making random number generator picks during the show and being like, well, here's the pools we came up with. What do we think?
Well, hopefully that doesn't happen and they hear this podcast and they're like, oh, let's do one of the cool reveal ideas that y'all talked about. We'll get the USA Ultimate ambassadors to come on and read off each pool, Selection Sunday style.
Selection Sunday. Let's do it. There are many options to make.
We can get teams to film themselves reacting to their reveal of what pool they're going to be in.
It's like imagining like some team, like their pool's looking great, and then they catch UNC at the end, and they're like, no.
I know the elation turns to just pain. That would be fantastic.
Okay, well, what we're going to do today is not randomized, but it's going to be a little bit more of a opinionated look at where teams stand. We're going to tier the D1 Nationals teams into 5 tiers. There's 5 spots in each pool, and so we're going to do 5 tiers, and we're going to pick our tiers, and we're going to argue over who should be where, and who belongs in the top tier, and who belongs in the bottom tier. So, without further ado, let's get right into it, Keith.
We do have a tiny bit more ado.
Oh, we do. You know what? Before we start,
we have a couple of retractions, some corrections to issue from last week's episode.
On the Upshot podcast that I do in disc golf, we call this the Mulligan segment.
Oh, nice.
We need to come up with a clever name for Ultimate. But
well, obviously, it's too bad Send It Back is taken, because that's what we're the
good point.
The the contested call, like somebody contested this on the internet and said we got to send this back.
Yeah, but like in general, this is going to be times when we're actually wrong and not just contesting. But I get the sentiment.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, you got to do it over. One of the weirdest rules in Ultimate. It's so strange to me. Every time it happens, I watch it happen. I'm like, and now we approximate where we might have been when this play happened, and hope that we're roughly in the right area. It's weird. But so two of those, both talking college men's D1. So mistakenly was talking about Paul Owens playing with Temple, who made it to the game to go and lost in a very, very close 1-point game against Ohio State in the Ohio Valley region. Paul Owens is incorrect as not a player from Temple. Actually plays at UPenn, I believe. It's Jake Butrica, his AMP teammate, or former AMP teammate, that I was thinking of, who played with Temple and was also not playing with them at regionals. So that was the name I was missing. The other correction to issue, I guess, is more of an opinion, which I stated that the Gulf Coast Conference in the Southeast men's D1 has struggled to put together. I was thinking of both D1 men's and D1 women's that had struggled to ever put together any kind of like consistent competitive team, which ignored Auburn's run of maybe 4 straight nationals appearances in the men's division. Now, that Auburn team seems to have faded from there. So I was kind of thinking bigger picture as establishment, but unfortunately, 4 years at nationals is a pretty good run. So don't want to completely lose sight of that.
Yeah, I think you were talking about it in the context of like big state schools.
Yeah, the Gulf Coast has so many big state schools that, I could easily see them, rivaling the Georgias and the Floridas that have so long been around the top of the Southeast in both women's and men's. But we haven't really seen any program like emerge in that way over time. Although Auburn is as close, I guess, as we've come, as they were a pretty strong club it looked like they might have really crested and kind of like hit that point where they were going to remain a top team. And that doesn't really come to fruition, but they had a really, really great run in the Southeast.
Yeah. So our apologies for those errors. And please just email us anytime if we say something that's wrong. deeplook@ultiworld.com. All right, well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to put teams into tiers. It's going to be a lot of fun. Stay with us. It's Deep Look. Welcome back to Deep Look. All right, Tier 1. Who's going to be in it? We're going to talk about it right now as we look at the D1 Nationals teams. Who belongs in the top tier? We're going to go 5 tiers deep in this tiering exercise, and we're going to begin in the women's division. Look, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on the top 2 teams here that we know are going to be in that tier 1 that we expect, perhaps. Is it more likely than not that they will meet in the final? Maybe with this new seeding structure, things could be a little different. But the Carleton and UNC, top 2 teams for some time now, ranked in the country. And do we even need to argue about this, Keith? Like, clearly these teams are a cut above. And the real question is, does anyone else join them in tier 1?
Charlie, I want to move to this, but you just made me think of something that feels really obvious now to me, and I'm sure some of our audience has realized. But going back briefly to the randomized seedings thing, when you and I were talking about this, we were talking about, what if we get some crazy stacked pool with 3 of the top 5 teams or whatever? That's not the real danger, because that's, the kind of thing, A, that happens anyway, and B, all those teams can make the bracket. We're like, what if, UNC and Carleton are in the same pool? Well, they still can meet in finals. What if they line up to be each other's quarterfinal matchup? What if they're on the same side of the bracket in semifinals? That's the actual danger that I hadn't thought about, is when you get into the bracket, what if the matchups line up so that the two teams that we think are the best play way too early in the bracket.
Well, I mean, let's think about it for a second. I like if you sat down and you did the statistical odds on this, like, first of all, it's 50-50 that, let's say, UNC and Carleton, assuming they win all their games, right? And 50-50 that they are going to meet in semis versus meeting in the final. Now, they shouldn't end up in quarters together unless things are really weird and there's like, but I think somebody would have to lose a game along the way for that to happen.
I think so, yes.
So that
but if they're in the same pool,
if they're in the same pool, then they won't end up in the same quarter because like the second place finisher in a pool is going to cross over into another pool's winner. But it could still end up that they end up on the same side of the bracket, I think. We'd have to sit down and really look at the full details of, are they going to do standard pre-quarters quarter structure this year? I assume so. But yes, you're right. I mean, there's a very good chance, it's literally a coin flip as to whether teams are going to meet would meet in the final, assuming they win all their games, versus the semifinal.
They should just, they'll never do this. And I totally understand why for the logistics of it. But if you're going to do the full random seeding, you should just have a bigger bracket. Maybe only one team gets eliminated in pool play. I don't know, but I don't think that's what's going to happen.
16 teams into.
Yeah. I mean, why give team? I guess you're rewarding a team for winning their pool, probably having to go 3-1 to do that. Can you win your pool at 2-2? I guess if the whole pool went 2-2, you can win on point diff. Yeah. So I guess that's possible.
Have 4 teams go 2-2 and one of the teams go 0-4, I think.
Oh, I guess you could. Yeah. Yeah, I think you could pull it off, but I don't know if I've ever seen that happen. I think the teams that win pools are either going to be 4-0 or 3-1.
Generally, yes.
So it's a fair reward to get a bye for that, and it probably is just better overall. But this ensures that you're less likely to lose a team for some weirdness. Plus, then you get the spicy bracket, but it does take some of the weight out of pool play. But anyway,
back to the question: UNC Carleton Tier 1. I don't think there's any argument.
Clearly, to me, these teams have to be in a tier of their own. I mean, we've been talking about this for it feels like 5 years. I mean, in actual calendar years, it's basically 3 years. We've been talking about the UNC Carleton showdown, and I would love to get it. I mean, maybe it'd be more. It's a win-win. Either we get this Titanic showdown, or we get some spice along the way. We get a great upset. So it's a win-win. The only thing that could go wrong is if they play each other and one of them blows the other one out. That would sap some of the joy out of it. But who knows? Who knows? But to me, they need to be the clear top two teams.
So, UCSB coming out undefeated from Southwest, they don't get a nudge up into that Tier 1 for you?
I don't think so. I mean, it's even with a strong region, it's a pretty short schedule.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's not like they necessarily went through the gauntlet. They played 5 games and they beat Davis and UCSD and Stanford, which is a nice run. Don't get me wrong. We thought we had those all of those teams have been in the top 10, I can say, at some point. So way too little data, I think, to really be declarative about them.
All right. Well, then let's go ahead and move on to Tier 2. I basically agree. I don't think we've seen any evidence that a team could realistically be deserving of matching those two in that top tier. I mean, these teams have been way out in front. You could maybe say Tufts from 2020, but of course they're not at Nationals. So that ship has sailed. So
and their roster was gutted.
Right. So let's go on to Tier 2. Who do you have in Tier 2, Keith?
Well, you mentioned UC Santa Barbara. I think this is a perfectly reasonable place for them. They obviously came out of an incredibly strong region. They've got some really exciting players who, I guess I can't say for sure what they've been doing with their off seasons, but these were players who were all over the awards podiums last year. Jasmine Childress is supposed to be back. Caitlin Weaver is back. We had her on the show just last week, if you didn't get a chance to check that out. So, I mean, they have star power. Caitlin was talking about the depth that they've recruited. They've added some new players who have stepped right into their O-line. I mean, it's a pretty exciting cocktail for them to be a team that I think has the ability to upset Carleton and UNC. I think most teams in the field, even playing against them playing poorly, still can't beat UNC and Carleton. I mean, it would take really, really 1% odds, for it to come to fruition. I think UCSB can beat them. I think they're that good. So I don't think they're in the same tier, because I don't think it's likely that they necessarily beat them, but I think they're competitive.
I would also put Washington in this tier.
Yeah,
I think, the talent from the Seattle area filtering in there has really helped them, solidify. I mean, we've seen their program grow so much over the last couple of seasons, and, the depth there is going to be unbelievable as well. I think they feel like less of a lock there to me than UCSB to some extent. But on the other hand, this is a great team. This is a semis favorite. And I don't see any reason that they should be down in tier 3. So I got them here in tier 2 as well.
More good recruits for Washington too. So they're going to be good.
This team is like on its way towards national championship contention in the next couple seasons.
Agreed. I mean, I think and if UCSB's recruiting is like this, I mean, I think that these two teams are trending upward and could be tier 1 teams, over time.
Does anybody else make tier 2 for you, Keith?
It's close. I think that when you look at the teams that we ended up in tier 3, so ultimately no, but it's close. I mean, these tier 3 teams, I feel like there's a lot of arguments to be made for a lot of them. UC San Diego, probably near the top of that list. And I'm increasingly intrigued by Pittsburgh, but I think that it's not quite close enough, and Washington and UCSB get a tier of their own.
Okay. Well, let's go on to tier 3 then. Who do you put in that tier? This is a wide tier.
The tiers in general, I think, are going to get wider as you go down the list. But this is a big tier, because this is where you get into your quarterfinals quality teams, your potential semifinalists if things break their way. But it's a big group with some really good teams. So I mentioned UC San Diego and Pitt. San Diego, they lost by I think like 4 and 5 in their 2 matchups against UCSB, which we felt like was enough to make it clear that they were in a different tier. So we've got them, and I really like Pittsburgh and what they've got going on for that team. I think there's some depth there. The veteran returners that they have from the likes of Jesse Sun, Beth Manterick, I think that they've got some club experience. They've got a lot of the things that I think you look for in a team that could break out. So they're, to me, one of the dangerous semifinals contenders that could surprise somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this list, and there's some teams that kind of maybe put in tier 4 that I almost want in tier 3. But I have the South Central teams here in tier 3. I think certainly the other 2 Southwest teams here, and then there's some teams I have more question marks about. Like, how good is Pittsburgh? Are they tier 3 good? Are they tier 4 good? I don't feel like I know. I might even be tier 2 good. What's the evidence that we have for them, right? They crushed a bad region. What else do we have?
That's true. There's not much. I mean, we're definitely working with imperfect sets of data here. That's certain.
So, I mean, here's the list that I've got. I got UC San Diego, Pittsburgh, Colorado, Western Washington, Davis, and maybe Texas. And then I also think maybe Georgia belongs in this tier. They're like right on that borderline for me. In fact, I think I want Georgia in and Texas in tier 4. I got to give credit to Texas, though. They played real tough against Colorado.
It's interesting because Texas, they had the Ohio State, what happened to Ohio State immense, which is they played incredibly well against a very strong team in the final, and then almost lost to a team that we don't project to be as good in the game to go. I mean, Texas was steps away from losing to WashU in the game to go. And so they pulled it out, which is a good sign for them. I think WashU is a pretty good team, and probably is better than some of the teams that will be in the field of nationals.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
It's not a great sign for being a tier 3 team necessarily, but the result against Colorado is. So, how do you weigh those two different types of
results? Colorado and Texas always play close games. That's what I think.
Love it.
But I think I put Colorado with like a much higher ceiling than Texas. So that's my take. I say Georgia's in tier 3, Texas is in tier 4. What do you say?
I'm way more skeptical about Georgia than you are. I mean, I know you saw them in person, which can sometimes, I know in my history can overweight my view of a team. They were, however, a pre-quarters team in 2019, and I think that shouldn't go overlooked. So I still mark them as a tier below this group, but I think that they're right on that borderline. Like they would be at the top of the next tier if they're not at the bottom.
I mean, let me take this moment to talk about Southeast Regionals. I was in Tallahassee over the weekend. I mean, Georgia just absolutely clobbered everybody. I mean, the final wasn't even competitive. It was 13-2 against Florida. Georgia's not a perfect team. And it's always hard to get a sense of how good a team is when they're playing against competition that's not really on their same tier, frankly. But they're very athletic. They have good team speed. They have a couple of strong throwers, but that is my question mark, is like, do they have the handlers? Will they be able to handle the reset pressure that good teams are going to apply to them? But I think they're athletic enough to be in tier 3 and be a team that's in that mix for pre-quarters and whatnot. No alumni for Georgia for either division because the school did not grant that, which, I think that hurts at the margins, of course, when you're playing against teams that are allowed to have their alumni. But, they were very impressive. I mean, they didn't let teams hang around. They just throttled everybody.
Always a good sign. Don't sleep on Western Washington, by the way. I mean, they went to 10-7 with Washington at regionals. There are some well-known names on this team if you follow the college scene. Ruby Cassidy, Samia Ishmael's back for them, Vale Dark, Tova Breen, Eleanor Jocelyn, and they picked up Allie Constantino, who you and I probably remember from watching her dominate the high school national invite maybe 3 years ago. But she's been in D3, but she's now with Western Washington, and I expect that she'll be a high impact player.
I mean, they could be a top of that tier 3.
They could be the best team in tier 3. I mean, it's definitely
all right. Let's move on to tier 4. So I have Texas. Keith, I think, has Georgia there. What about the next few teams you have here?
So the next team to me, I have Vermont. They're a team that they won New England. They got a pretty convincing win over a Tufts team that is really tough to grade because they're so different from the Tufts of last year. But we certainly know that they had talent, so that's not in question. Vermont, they're going to be thin. We expect them to not have a really particularly deep roster after losing some key players from what was a pretty deep team. They're going to be at their first nationals, but they're going to have Kennedy McCarthy there, and that's worth a lot. And obviously, it played out pretty well for them at regionals. So I think this is a team that they have a high level of variance for their outcomes, but I think that they're worth putting in tier 4 near the top.
I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, they could also be tier 3 type team, but it's hard to pick a team that's never been to nationals, that has a kind of a small roster that we don't have a good sense of where they're going to match up, with teams with more depth, which typically comes into play at nationals. Now, everybody always says, right, it's like, well, there's only 2 games a day, or, it's such a light schedule comparatively, but those 2 games are so hard and require so much intensity and focus that it takes it out of you. I mean, sure, it's not playing 4 games in a day, but I think teams that don't have depth end up losing in pre-quarters because it still just is a grind. And I think the plan is still, you play 2 games one day, 2 games the next day, and then if you're playing the pre-quarters, you play them that 3rd game on the 2nd day. It's going to take a toll on your legs. But we'll see about Vermont. It's like a classic college team. It's like a couple solid players and then like a crazy good superstar who can just carry, but other teams with smart defensive strategies can maybe neutralize. So we'll see.
Teams at club nationals have had trouble neutralizing.
Well, right. You can't go one on
college kids. Yeah. some of the best teams though may have defenders who can, do what's necessary to try and make her life harder. And it can be tough to carry that load over the course of nationals when every team might have a defense or strategy to make you work for that one. What teams do you have in Team 4 that I haven't mentioned yet?
Well, I've got the Great Lakes teams in here, Chicago and Michigan. I think, these would, at a normal nationals, I think these would be some of the bottom teams. But this year, we've got a kind of a large tier 5 with a lot of teams that are just really, not teams we'd normally see at nationals. And so, I'm really curious about Chicago specifically. I think that we don't totally know how good they're going to be. But I've got both those teams in here. I've also got Virginia in here. Obviously they're not even anywhere close to UNC, but they still came out of a decently solid AC. I know a lot of other teams kind of like near on that level, back into nationals kind of quality in a normal season. And so those are my last teams in there. Virginia obviously also has a lot of institutional knowledge and has been a very successful team historically.
That's kind of I like Chicago. I like the club talent that they have. Getting Jocelyn's son, also who's a U.S. national team U20 player, formerly is a nice get for them. And so I actually think Chicago is probably closer to the Georgia and Vermonts than the rest of this tier. Because for me, I almost like if we had 6 tiers, I think I would have a tier 5 with Michigan, Virginia, and then probably Ohio and Florida State. And I think those teams are pretty close together, and trying to find a line between them was very difficult. Michigan, like Virginia, has a couple of pretty experienced players, a lot of institutional strength, big numbers, big roster. So I think that I'm a little iffy on them as tier 4 or tier 5, but when in doubt, we've usually been able to hedge towards the programs that have had success because of all the strength that gives you, being able to pass on that institutional knowledge, having experience being in nationals, having somebody who can help steer the ship when you get there. That stuff is useful. So I think I'm going to put Michigan and Virginia in tier 4, but it's very close.
So let's go to tier 5. Top of tier 5 for me is Florida State. They survived a wild Southeast Regionals, playing Florida for the 4th time in the series. And after losing to Florida in semifinals, beat them in the game to go in a game that was just, you could hardly separate the two teams, right? I mean, I didn't get a chance to watch the entire game, but it was very similar in the semi. Or in the semi, Florida went up early. Florida State was struggling against their zone defense. Really just not being aggressive enough, not attacking enough. They were swinging the disc very comfortably, but then were not able to take advantage of the gaps downfield and would eventually turn it over. And Florida was scoring with a much more aggressive attacking mindset, going to the deep space right away. And they took a pretty sizable early lead. Florida State chipped all the way back into the game. They ended up actually taking half. And then Florida got a couple late breaks to win that game. Then go on, of course, the game was basically meaningless because you just got to advance to the final where you were going to get demolished by Georgia. Florida did get demolished by Georgia. Those teams then met again in the game to go. Super tight, rivalry game, and Florida State comes out on top 13-12. They're a solid team. They're a solid team. They have some smart players, like pretty good depth, all things considered. Like they've got players, good talented players on both lines. They have some good handlers, but they lack the like super dynamic thrower that can really help unlock a college offense, and just some general issues with drops and a little inconsistency. Like they're definitely a tier 5 team, but I think of this tier 5, they're clearly the best of the bunch. Pre-quarters would be a good target for them to try to set their sights on, I think, at nationals.
So you've seen both of these teams in person. So I'll give you a task. What would you make a score between Florida State and SUNY Binghamton? Two teams we have in tier 5.
Binghamton had a couple of really good athletes, and otherwise, I think was able to take advantage of what is otherwise a quite weak Metro East Regional. And, there was a lot of straight up force flick and nothing particularly complex defensively. I think Florida State would try some stuff that would probably disrupt the Binghamton offense quite a bit. Both teams would get breaks. I think Binghamton would get breaks, but Florida State just like is well above that level. They probably win in a game to 15. They probably win 15-8, 15-9.
Okay. That's pretty comfortable. All right. Well, that gives me some.
I mean, obviously, I'm having to make assessments based on like what's the relative team strength, the quality of the teams around them. I just saw like more across the board skill on Florida State than I did with Binghamton, who had one or two players that really drove everything for them, and looked like a team that knew how to run a basic structured offense, but would struggle against much complexity.
I think Florida State at the top of this tier is probably right. Ohio's the other team that I would think about, despite their split series with Penn at regionals. I think that was something of both a product of the conditions and the nerves. But we may have overestimated Ohio initially. We'll see what that turns into at regionals. Binghamton, BU, Penn. I mean, I think these are teams that we would traditionally expect to be the last seeds in their pool. If we were coming
let's
into
just be honest
seeding
with ourselves. These are teams that would not normally be at nationals.
Well, Binghamton, they're the best team in the Metro East. That team goes to nationals.
But like there were multiple teams that didn't play in Metro East.
That's true. No Ottawa. No.
Give them credit, right?
Yeah,
they won the games in front of them 100%. But I think it's just in the spring. I don't expect Binghamton to make it again.
I don't know if they'll make it again, but they looked the part on the tape. I think as far as being the best team in the Metro East.
They clearly were the best team at Metro East regionals in 2021. Yes.
So I think that there's a chance that they are not the weakest team at nationals. Like I think that they have enough of that in them to potentially
I'll give
be
you that
team. I don't know. I really don't know what to expect from Penn and BU. And I saw BU once in the fall, but I mean they were very much in kind of like almost XY mode. They were running the roster really deep. A lot of rookies.
They got demolished by Tufts in the game to go.
Yeah,
and then Tufts climbed in.
I think we're right to have all these teams in tier 5, except for maybe Florida State. They're a little borderline.
All right, well let's turn our attention over to the men's division, and let's go back up to the top. Keith, tier 1. We know we've got again a similar situation. We've got two teams that we know are in. UNC, Colorado, right? UNC. The best program of the last decade in college men's ultimate, multiple Ring of Fire national champions from the club division, incredible roster depth, incredible pipeline. They're going to have rookies who are contributing probably at this nationals, and they also have a top end that is going to be as good as anybody's. On the other side, we head out west, Colorado Mama Bird. They basically played together at club nationals as Lotus, had this amazing club season, going to have a ton of chemistry, dominated a Texas team that's pretty darn good at regionals, arguably the favorite over UNC if you take out the context of everything we've seen over the last 10 years.
I'm not buying that argument,
but I think I guess
arguably means you could make a case, but I don't know how you can put them over UNC
think they're young. I think they're freshman, sophomore, like bottom chunk of their roster is better than UNC's.
That's probably true, but
the rookie class,
that part of the roster is probably the part that matters the least.
Come on, the rookie class they had in 2020 they had like 3 of the top 5 recruits in the country.
Sure, I'm not saying that group isn't wrong. Don't forget that UNC had Ben Dameron, who we just saw starting on the ring D line.
It's true
in their rookie class that year.
We underestimated.
UNC's got good recruits too. They're bringing in more good players.
We'll have plenty of time to talk about this. We agree, Steve, that they're both in tier 1.
We do, and then I think there's like probably 4 teams in a. Do you think this team could be tier 1 kind of situation? There's 4 teams in that spot.
Well, so who do you think should be? Well, so name the 4 teams, and then let's talk about them each.
The 4 teams to me, I'm sure some people hate to hear it. Carleton, got to put them in consideration with all the top level talent they have on the team. Washington, Brown, and Pittsburgh. To me, you could make an argument for any of those 4 teams to be tier 1. What do you think? What's your response to that?
Well, I mean, I think that's the correct group. I think maybe you could slip Texas into that group, but after losing pretty big to Colorado at regionals, I don't think you could really put them in the same tier. Let's look at cut. Okay, so they only played 4 games at regionals. They beat Wisconsin by 3. They beat Minnesota by 7. Of course, they had that loss to Minnesota at conferences, but come on, conferences was really weird this year. You like what you see on their roster. They've got a lot of good players, but they've underperformed their talent most of the last 5 years. It's just a fact. And I can't put them in tier 1 because of that. Like the last time we saw them in 2020, they lost a very winnable game they probably should have won at warm-up and then looked kind of bad at Smoky Mountain Invite. And their most important player, Joe White,
missed nationals,
is not on the team this year.
2 of the last 3 years?
Right. So, I mean, we're giving them a lot of credit for name recognition. And the results.
Well, I mean, the other year that they missed the other year that they made nationals, they made semifinals.
Yeah. I mean, and so, when did they win? 16, 17?
They won in 2017. 17. So they didn't miss nationals in 2017. They won in 2017. They made semifinals in 2018, and then missed nationals in 2019. They also missed in 2016. So their 4-year mark, they either don't make it or they make it to the last 2 rounds.
Which is a testament to the quality of the North Central, to some extent. I mean, But yes, I put them in tier 2. I can't do it. Can you do it?
No, I can't. And let me correct myself just in case avoid whatever our unnamed correction segment is. They made it in 2016. They didn't make the bracket, I think. I think they missed the bracket in 2016. They didn't make it to nationals in 2015.
Got it.
So yeah, a lot of mixed results we can say for Carleton. And yeah, that to me,
they are the one amazing program that seems to miss nationals regularly.
It's weird, right?
I think it's the North Central.
That's definitely part of it. Okay, so
I mean, how many years have we seen Wisconsin play like trash during the regular season, or at least at the beginning of the regular season, miss a bid, and then be extremely competitive at regionals? I mean, it's like every season.
Many times.
Every season.
We'll get to Wisconsin later. We'll be tiering them as well. So the next team for me is Washington. So, Washington's got a lot of club talent on this team. A lot, breakout club player of the year. One of the breakout club players of the year, Tony Vaneri, is on this team, and he's going to be a real handful when he gets set to cover somebody. This is going to be a deep team, and I think for me, I'm want to tier 1 them. I think that they have a little bit between when I see them and the other teams that I mentioned.
This is a really good team. Jack Brown, Asaf Galan, Manny Eckert, Jacob Steen, Gabe Port, Vaneri. I mean, they have a lot of players who were like the best player on their high school team that was a top finisher at high school national invite. And, the pipeline is real in Seattle. I mean, Lucas Chen, Derek Morad, like
every line is really going to have
good. And
every line is going to have multiple club nationals quality players, and they will not put anybody in the field.
They're for sure the sneaky like championship quality team. I mean, they crushed at regionals. Their closest game was 13-6. Okay. They smoked Western Washington. They smoked Utah. Like Utah State that made nationals, they beat 15-6. So I am with you, Keith. I think that if a team belongs in tier 1 with UNC and Colorado, it's probably Washington. Now the question is,
I thought I was going to get disagreement here.
I think this team had a great chance of being a semifinals team in 2020. We didn't get to see it. And, what more do you need to see? I mean, a bunch of players on this team have had spectacular club or AUDL seasons. Their top 7 is very good. Maybe not quite as good as UNC's, but it's very good.
But the thing is, that's true of most of the other teams that we have in tier 2. So, that is to some degree true of Carleton and Pittsburgh and Brown. It's a question of, do you think they're closer to those teams or to Colorado and UNC? And where's the line? That's the hard part. I think we're taking a little bit of a leap of faith putting Washington in tier 1 rather than at the top of tier 2. But I'm going to take that leap. Don't get me wrong.
Pittsburgh.
I'll hold your hand and we can close our eyes and jump.
Pittsburgh's got the Ing brothers, but I question Pittsburgh top 7 compared to the Washington. Top 4, sure, but top 7. Brown's really good, but they lose Mac Hecht from their 2019 championship team. Ultimately, you know what, Keith? Ultimately, I think it's the same as in the women's division. I'm going to put those 2 teams on their own tier.
Understandable. I will take this leap alone, Charlie.
Okay. Let's go to tier 2. Well, we just named 3 of those teams. What about NC State? This is the team that for me is like borderline between 2 and 3. Of course, they didn't really come close to beating UNC, but this is a team that has grown a lot over the last few years. They've got the alums. They are only in the shadow because of how good UNC is. Otherwise, they otherwise dominated the region outside of that UNC. So do you think that this team's good enough to be in that tier 2, or are they a step below?
It's tough. I think that they are.
I mean,
they're kind of like how I feel about Washington in tier 1, tier 2, and that's how I feel about NC State in tier 2, tier 3. I mean, they're really deep.
Their roster is huge. It's like 30 players.
I mean, they also have like 60 people, on their roster, or whatever. But
they got some. This guys.
Is the kind. If this were like a professional sports team or whatever, I would be like, oh, they need to make a consolidation trade. They're a little too deep. Yeah, they can use a little more star power.
More top guys.
That's what I think. It's hard because you can only there's a point where you can only put 7 of those players out of the field at once, and somebody on the you want to have the best player on the field. And I think I like Trevor Lynch as much as or more than anybody in the Ulti World offices. But I just I can't put him on quite at the same level of Liam Searles-Bowes or the best players that we're talking about here, Michael.
Yeah, I hear you, but I think that
but the depth is really valuable. I mean, they go really deep.
They're deeper than Pitt. Austin Van Alten.
I think that they're like 14th best player might be better than the 14th best player on most of these.
And remember,
teams.
They were a little banged up coming into 2019 Nationals, and they did pretty good.
Yeah,
I'm high on this team.
I'm gonna say tier 2.
I'm high on this team. I am too.
I think they're behind all those other teams, unless you're depending on your
look at the scores they had against teams not named UNC. They beat William and Mary 15-4. They beat Wilmington 15-9. Those are not close games. Those are beatdowns.
No.
Those are beatdowns. And those are good teams. Those are teams that are better than teams in our tier 5 at Nationals.
So other potential tier 2 teams for you? SLO, Texas, Georgia. You just saw Georgia.
Boy.
What do you think?
Texas is close. Texas is close. Cal Poly is close. Let me take, this is my Southeast Regionals. Let's chat about it in a moment. Georgia, similarly to the women's team, dominant in the men's division. Crushed Tulane in the final, 15-4. Very athletic. I was shocked to learn after the game that they had no alumni. Shocked. Some very talented players on this Georgia team, and they look like for sure the Southeast king for the foreseeable future. Same as the women on the. The UGA just.
I wonder how far back in Southeast Regionals men's history you have to go to find Georgia playing a close game.
Well, I mean, they weren't the. It's been a while, but there were years where they weren't the obvious favorite. Within my memory,
there were years, but I mean, it's been at least 2 seasons, I think, since they bashed everybody's heads in for 2 years in a row.
They're very energy-driven team. It's a team that you don't want to play, I think, because if you catch them and they're hitting, they're going to be hard to beat. But they are also, I think, susceptible because they have a very sort of aggressive mentality. They're going to throw a lot of hucks, and if you can defend that, you're going to get the disc from them for sure. I don't think teams in the Southeast had the athletes to match, and so Georgia just rolled everybody. But I think more disciplined teams are going to have, going to be able to force turnovers. Their defense is tough. It's not unbeatable. Tulane had plenty. Well, I shouldn't say plenty. They lost soundly, but they had good O points, and they had some mistakes that really hurt them in the game. Those sort of unforced errors. But Georgia also got legit takeaways and like big layout blocks from Georgia. It's hard to know like where is Tulane relative to the other teams. It feels like they're like kind of a step below. So where does that put Georgia in my mind? I think they're a quarters team. So I look at this list and I'm thinking, okay, well, we've got UNC and Colorado, and then we've got Washington, Carleton, Pittsburgh, Brown, NC State. Well, that's 7 teams. Is Georgia my last finalist, or is it, my last quarterfinalist, or is it Texas, or is it Michigan, or is it Cal Poly? The reason that I feel like I can't answer that question means I put them in tier 3.
Interesting. Texas is the team to me. I know you've been high on them. I mean, we talked about potential title contenders, and you had them like just kind of around the margin there. If there was a team that you might put in tier 2 that we haven't mentioned yet, it feels like
but I think I have to downgrade them slightly after getting crushed by Colorado.
I'm in the same boat there. So it sounds like we're moving on to tier 3. All right. So we've already mentioned Texas and Georgia. A team that I like a lot for tier 3 is Michigan. This was a team I think we were high on going into the 2020 season. They've recruited well. They had this really deep rookie class from the prior year. I remember when we were sitting down, like having rookie of the year conversations, and we were, somebody pointed out like, wow, if any of these rookies had been alone on this team, they might have made it on the rookie year podium. But because they were together, they were like cannibalizing each other's votes. They also, I think, have some key returners back with the extended eligibility rules. So this is going to be another team that I think is deep. They've got some club experience. They've got the good recruits. Like those are the things that we've been marking off, the check boxes we've been hitting for teams that could compete. And I think they have the capability of beating one of the tier 2 teams in the right setting.
I agree with that. I think the tier 3 teams are like legit contenders. It feels to me in general, this particular season, that like in the women's division, I feel a little bit more skeptical that the tier 3 teams can like go up and beat tier 1 and 2 teams. But in the men's division, I feel like it's a little bit more reasonable that a team like Michigan could be a little better than we expect. Now, Texas getting smoked by Colorado, it's like, all right. And NC State not really coming that close to UNC. We have NC State right at that like bottom of tier 2, UNC tier 1. Maybe I'm overstating it, but it just feels like there's like a bunch of really, really solid teams in the middle, a couple of teams at the top, really solid teams in the middle, and then like a bottom tier, whereas it feels a little bit more stretched out in the women's division.
I agree with that. And, I look at this tier 3 and I'm impressed. I mean, we talked about Pittsburgh being a rock solid team in tier 2, and maybe, even have the potential to be, you could argue them in tier 1, and Ohio State played them, right to the edge. So, I mean, we ended up with the same thing that we did with Texas and women's, because they had the same situation. Played great against a top quality team in the final, and then nearly blow it in the backdoor game. Ohio State, that narrow win against Temple in the backdoor game is enough to penalize them and put them, in a concerning position in tier 3.
I think there's a couple of things at play here. Number one, I think Temple is a little better than you're giving them credit for. Number two, I think that the conditions condensed scores, games were lower scoring, and there were probably a lot of turnovers. And so that means that games stay a little closer than they would in better conditions. I mean, do I think
a lot of scores in one direction?
Do I think Pitt is going to be a 1-point win over Ohio State in normal standard, 55 degree and sunny conditions? No, I don't. I think they're 2, 3, 4 points better. Same is probably true for Ohio State over Temple, but I think that, pouring snow, it just makes it hard to to separate in those conditions.
True. Slo's another team I think people would maybe even be surprised to see in Tier 3 rather than Tier 2, given their recent success, given some of the big names on their team, Calvin Brown, Jake Thorne, KJ Koo, that crew is all back. So, I mean, I think Slo's going to be very competitive, and it would not surprise me to see them out, even in the end, finishing in a higher place than many of these Tier 2 teams.
They have some really strong top-level players, Connor Schofield, another one, but I feel like the depth is a little bit more of a question mark for me just because they turned over some of the key guys for them that took them to semifinals in 2019. How do they, stack up after that? You like what you see from their results. At regionals, they win 15-9 over UCSB, 15-8 over Stanford. They're really not challenged, and they look pretty good on tape. I just think that they're probably not as good as they were in 2019, and so then you got to drop them a tier.
I share those concerns that maybe a little bit of the depth that made them strong is no longer in play for them. Although they were pretty comfortable in the Southwest. We don't really have a sense of how good the Southwest is, but yeah, they're just missing some of the names I feel like were the 5, 6, 7 guys on many of their lines.
I think they're still going to be a very talented team. I think they'll probably have a great offense, and schematically, Cody Mills is a great coach. They could definitely upset a team or two. I don't see them in semis again.
I'm in the same boat. Anybody else you'd have in Tier 3?
I think we've named all the teams.
Okay, so on to Tier 4. Who's your top team in Tier 4?
Northeastern.
If there's one that separates themselves meaningfully. Okay.
They've had some time to really gel as a club team. They almost upset Sprout at regionals. Then they're not as good as Brown, but they outright got the second spot, right? They didn't lose to a team that was going to decline a bid. They got the second spot over some talented teams in the region. I think that, they've been to nationals in the last couple of years. I think that this is a solid team, pre-quarters team with a hope of trying to make it to quarters. I mean, Ben Field is really legit. I know we've been saying his name for a long time, but I mean, he could be the guy that takes them to quarters.
The hard thing I feel like with Ben Field is they need him to do so much. He really, I think, is probably at his best, as your big downfield defender. And a lot of times I feel like they need him to be a key part of the offense too, to activate. They just don't have a lot of other players who are really dynamic downfield. So I think that's a tough spot for. It's just going to be a lot of demand.
Don't forget they picked up Gus Norbaum.
Even adding Gus Norbaum though doesn't necessarily solve that problem. I mean, he's obviously a tremendous thrower, but he's not somebody who's going to take over the field down.
Do you put a different team ahead of them in Tier 4?
Yeah, I think. While I liked what I saw in Northeastern on tape, they also have a rookie who is on my summer league championship team, wow. Charlie. So, he's got the bona fides.
Really quickly. I'm sorry.
Shout out to Ethan Cook.
I'm sorry to interrupt. My fall league team came in 5th out of 6 seeds. Made a run all the way to the championship. And we were up 11-6 and we lost.
I don't know. Do I want to hear how this ends?
We lost 12-11.
Okay.
It was brutal. It was a great day of games though, and we had an awesome season. It was super fun. We just couldn't quite get that last goal, and we got this cap. It was a +1 cap. So we had I think we had at least 2 0 points to win, maybe 3, and we couldn't close it out.
Did you have a hand? Any key mistakes?
I did have a tough late turnover. At 11-8 maybe. I was handling and kind of the reset wasn't there, and I was looking downfield for a long time and nothing was there. And the mistake that I made is I tried to jam a little forehand side backhand in. And I think it was Sam Lee from UNC, who's living in New York City now and is a massively underrated and won't be again in the Mud League draft. Got a big layout D on the under. And I'm upset with myself for not just punting there because it gave up a short field turn and a relatively easy break. The team we lost to had the number 1 overall draft pick in the league, John Lithio of the New York Empire and Tanassi. And he gave us a lot of problems in the game, I'll be honest.
I can imagine. So going back to our tiers here, my tier 4 team at the top. I don't feel like there's a ton of separation between the teams that I make for tier 4. Wilmington, Wisconsin, and Northeastern. I think I probably have Wilmington at the top of that list, then Wisconsin, then Northeastern. That's probably where I'm at. I think Connor Russell is going to be a big part of this Wilmington team. I think they are going to have more depth than those other 2 teams. I don't know whether they have enough firepower with Connor Russell when they go up against the truly top-level teams, but they're going to be feisty, as we've seen them be.
Yeah, I'm trying to come up with another team to put in this group, and I'm just not sure I can talk myself into anybody. I don't think that Illinois or Cornell out of the Great Lakes Metro East belong up in tier 4. Utah State is an interesting team, but it just felt like the results and the newness of the team to the national stage, like it's hard to put them into tier 4 with teams that have, been there before, like we see in tier 4. Tulane is interesting, but I watched both the final and their game to go win over Florida. They're solid. They have a couple of very talented players, but I just don't think there's enough to put them in that top tier. Like they just can't, like offensively, they just don't have enough to be competitive, consistently at nationals, I don't think. And then, you've got UC San Diego, which, I think the Southwest is probably a 1-bid region right now. And so,
wow.
I mean, do you think that like UCSD was impressive?
It's the hard part about the Southwest is that they would benefit from a probabilistic system, I think.
Sure, because there's always like a bunch of teams,
like 4 or 5 teams that would be in the like 22 to 35 in the rankings, but not necessarily another team that is threatening to get into the top 20.
Yeah, I mean, I think
a tale as old as time.
Yeah, I know. They seem like a solid team, but I can't put them in tier 4. Like I don't see.
Yeah, I don't think I can justify that either.
In tier 3, and I think if you said like, okay, it's going to be Wilmington versus UCSD, I think it's like Wilmington minus 3.5 or something. So I think I got to put them in tier 5 as well.
I'm with you. I think the tier 5 for us was kind of clear cut. I mean, I think that there's some good club level talent on most of these teams. Illinois has Reed Martin and Eli Artemekis. Utah State has a couple of guys, Garrett Martin. There's going to be good players on these teams,
sure.
But I just don't know if they're going to be able to put a strong 7 on the field, point in and point out.
And that's the challenge.
Yeah.
So there you go. Those are our tiers, and we'll see. Now we have the tiers, Keith. When we go back, once we get the seeding, or the groups, I guess I should say, the pools, the selected pools randomly, we'll be able to sit down and be like, okay, how many tier 1 teams, tier 2 teams in the pools, and like do kind of like an analysis of the strength of the pools based on these tiers.
Indeed. And because of the way that they stack up, like you're probably likely to get something that's off. But it's interesting because it could balance out in a weird way. It could be like you have two tier 2 teams, but then 2 tier 5 teams in your pool.
Right.
So it's like, what do you make of that? Judging the overall strength of pools is going to be difficult.
Going to be fun though. This is going to be a very interesting exercise. As it stands, still a little unclear what the details are going to be and what geographically constrained means. So you tell me. I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
The other thing is we've just got to take USA Ultimate's word for it. I mean, They could come up with the pools and then see one pool is stacked and just be like, nope, we're just going to move this team over here.
No, I want,
and then
I
be
want,
like, look, it
I
was,
want
it was random.
streamed lottery balls. I want, we need the full randomness. Somehow the Knicks are still going to get, the 21st seed or something. They're not going to get the pick that they want.
Oh yeah, the NBA definitely has it out for the most important media market on the face of the planet. I'm sure they're really rigging it against them, just like the NHL is rigged for the Canadian teams. The Maple Leafs.
There were a lot of bing bong calls going on at Southeast Regionals, just like random guys on the sideline, like at random points during the point, bing bong.
Do you actually hear people yelling bing bong in New York?
No, I have not heard it on the street or anything.
Okay.
But it's an incredible...
It's a meme.
But unfortunately, all of this bing bong energy has been going by the wayside as the Knicks play really bad basketball lately. So, oh, well. What's going to be the bing bong viral video of Ultimate? We need something like that.
We do. And shout out to our meme generators on the Twitter sphere.
All right, that is going to do it for today's show. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. We're going to talk a little Thanksgiving in our subscriber bonus segment. We're also going to talk about the future of national seeding and what we might learn from this year and what it could inform for the future. So stay tuned for our Thanksgiving hot takes. You can become a subscriber for less than $4 a month at ultiworld.com/subscribe. For Keith Raynor, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we will talk to you next week after Thanksgiving right here on Deep Look.